What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the C2C CFB Underdog show, where there's more pick'ems discussed than acronyms used in the title. It's Ethan Sauers, myself. We're live. We do this every week, typically Wednesday afternoons, typically a late lunch, we'll call it, for those that are colleagues of ours at work. Thanks for watching, guys. And here to talk about Underdog and the pick'ems available for the weekday games and also maybe a couple random weekend teams. Ethan, the weekday games are pretty interesting. I'm pretty stoked about this Friday slate of games specifically, and for a showdown, App State South Alabama is pretty awesome too.
Yeah, I'm excited for this week. Have to mention, because you always have to brag about your wins. Last week was very good, made up for the not so great week 2. But yeah, looking to chase and stack some wins here. Looking at week 4. You want to jump right in with South Alabama and App State?
Yeah, let's do it. I mean, this is kind of a hodgepodge of running backs, right, for App State, whereas South Alabama maybe a little bit tougher to figure out because they just came off a very rude performance against Northwestern. Yeah, it was just not very kind. Northwestern State, I think it was, where they stopped the game essentially at like 77 points or something like that.
Yeah.
Are there any of these that like really scream out to you as like really good picks?
I've been waffling back and forth on this Joey Aguilar number that's grown recently. We're up to 301.5. And I was on the fence about 292.5. And I think 301.5 is enough to make me go lower. It's not one that I feel like insanely comfortable with because South Alabama has been playing very fast in their pace of play. I don't have it pulled up, but I was looking at it earlier. They are at least like top 3rd in the nation in pace of play. So it makes me a little bit nervous to be on any App State unders, but Joey Aguilar, 301.5, I'd say under if pushed. That's probably the one I feel most comfortable with. I was kind of hoping we'd get some yardage numbers for Bullock and Castle. Let me refresh, just make sure I've got the most recent numbers up here. Moved things around, but didn't really change the numbers I'm seeing. So since we don't have that, I think Caden Robinson is another guy who I could be convinced to go under on his 6 receptions or his yardage. I don't hate either of those. What are you feeling? Are there any guys here or any plays that you're like, I definitely need to get action on this game?
I think the what's his name? Aguilar is the most appealing with the under again. I think honestly, from a prop perspective, a picks perspective, this is the game that I'm like the least confident in.
Totally.
I think I like the other 3 on Friday way more, but of course we can't go Thursday night without something.
Yeah.
I think Jamal Pritchett over 81.5 yards is interesting. He's going to get the target share that you need.
Yeah.
He's made some really big plays, so I do think that one's interesting. But again, the Aguilar under 301.5 feels about right. In terms of under for sure.
Well, that's reassuring. That'll likely get some bad money tossed on it from me. So
you wonder about Gio Lopez. He's not truly a passer. 254.5 is like it's a fairly decent size number.
Yeah.
So right, like if I basically only do 3s and 5s. So if I'm going to be doing a Thursday night one, I need to find something on Friday, or what can I do from Thursday? And so I think I would do under Aguilar, under Gio, but over on Pritchett would be interesting. And you get the boosted payout because you're going reverse correlation, which is good. Yeah, which is kind of an interesting. I did that a little bit last week with Texas State. I think it's way more applicable when it's not a receiver one like Pritchett.
Yeah.
I think it's better when it's like this random tight end line.
Yeah.
Because like betting or picking under 21.5 receiving yards for a tight end is not going to kill you. I'm sorry, going over or under reverse is not going to really impact you too much. But yeah, what do you think about the Geo line? You kind of seem to like it under.
Yeah, I think I like the Aguilar one just a little bit more. It's so tough with game script early with these G5 teams because like you just don't know what's real. But that being said, like we've seen South Alabama have running backs start to emerge, like Bothwell and Bullock, and when healthy, McReynolds is an interesting guy to have in your backfield. Like, does South Alabama want to run the ball against App State? I would assume they do. It's just a matter of will game script allow them to, in being able to break that down and make sure that we do have, the ability to run the ball, and that we're not just forced into like hero ball with Gio. Because I mean, Gio's got receivers that if he has to play hero ball, he could hit the higher on that one for sure.
He could definitely. Let's look at Friday, because I think that one, to me, specifically this Illinois-Nebraska game, has all the edges.
We got Rayola as our cover pick today, right?
Yeah, let's talk about it.
Yeah,
he did me a little dirty a couple weeks ago. I had to go longest rush on him, and he beat the over, but then he got sacked twice. It went from 12 rushing yards to 7. This guy does not want to run.
Yep.
So I think this under 8.5 rushing yards is great. I mean, you're basically, he only is going to get it if he has like a 10-yard scamper. And even then, he could get sacked once or twice. Yep. And then that goes back under. I don't want to jinx it, but I don't know why they keep doing this, except to help fund this show.
Yeah, it seems, I joked around on Slack saying that we were tempting the gods by going back to the well on this one, but it absolutely makes too much sense to try and hit the lower on this one. I will say I know the risk that I'm getting into after seeing it, 2 weeks ago unfold the way it did. But I don't mind it. Illinois is a good enough defense that, they should be able to contain a quarterback. If not, get the sacks. Like, they should be able to get home, I think. But even if they don't get home, they should do a decent enough job of, containing and minimizing run lanes that getting the only way that I see him hitting this is like a 15-yard run, and then we don't get 2 sacks for enough yardage, but I don't know. It'll be interesting. I don't know if it's my favorite one in this game, but it's definitely one that I feel comfortable putting in, like those 3 and 5 tickets.
Yeah, you're going against our brand by not liking it the most, to be quite honest. By the way, if you're in the chat, if you're watching live, feel free to ask questions. Bendejo asks, are we still throwing away Grayson McCall's 2023 season when evaluating them for 2024?
Yeah, I think a decent amount, but I mean, I don't think his 2024 definitely hasn't elevated his
I think
level.
With McCall, he just hasn't. Was never really like a passer from an NFL perspective. Like it was very much scheme based. It felt like at Coastal he got banged up, and then I think we're now seeing, oh man, that injury like really impacted him, because like to go from what he was to where he is now, like something obviously happened. Kind of like we talked about in this week's pod with Jalen Daniels. Like he's not himself. Like there's something going on, or that injury impacted him more than we realized or were hoping. So yeah, I think Grayson's about toast. He's like a kebab. You can,
especially if CJ Bailey performs the way I alluded to in our podcast, which will drop later this week. So. This is
the same coaching staff that like really messed up the MJ Morris stuff, and maybe MJ was gone regardless. But I suspect if Bailey shows any sort of pulse, that they'll do their best to keep him, which is probably meaning that they would play him a bunch. So
gotta lean into it.
So you said Rayola incorrectly, by the way, is not your favorite.
Incorrectly. Yeah.
Which one is from this?
I am a fan. So they took down the completions or the receptions for Janirin Bonner. I'm probably butchering that first name. From what I saw, he is a former fullback, maybe still potential fullback. He didn't have the backfield snaps that made me suggest they're still using him that way. He's been lining up a lot in the slot. But his game log, if you check it out, he had 2 targets in the, I believe that's Northern Iowa game. and he was not targeted at all against Colorado. He had 3 targets in the UTEP game. So he had a reception number of 1.5. That was the one that I hopped on early. I still like his under on 14.5 receiving yards. Just from a usage standpoint, again, we were looking at 26 yards on 3 receptions against UTEP, I'm sorry. And then 5 yards on 1 reception against Northern Iowa. So I'm there for that. It's a small volume play. I feel about the same on Colin Dixon on the other side of the ball. Again, he had a reception number that was taken down, but I feel just fine going with lower than 16.5 receiving yards. He had 4 targets for 2 receptions against Central Michigan, 36 yards on that one. And then against Eastern Illinois, he had a target that he brought in for a catch, and he had 7 yards there. They're small volume guys. They're low usage guys. Do you have any hesitation? Is there anything I'm missing? Any injuries at the receiver position that could put this in peril?
So the Bonner one makes sense to me for sure. We have him around 17 yards, which means that like when you're simulating it a bunch of times, that the under feels pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just don't see him as. What's funny is he's got like the 3rd most routes run for receivers, so it's up there. But he just doesn't seem to be a guy they necessarily want to target.
Yep.
It is a little bit tough, right? Because he's going to be on the field a good bit, but it doesn't seem like they're going his way. Dixon, I don't know. It's like almost the same boat. I definitely think there's some promise to it, and again, like I think. Our projections like right around the number 2, which means we like the under.
Yeah.
He ran 14 routes last week. I mean, 2 weeks ago he had 6 routes. The week before that he had 10. So it's not really all that encouraging in terms of like how many snaps he could play. This one's different than Bonner though, in that he's not going to see a ton of time on the field. Like he's not a heavy.
And you're saying he saw the fewest amount of snaps in the one G4 or P4 game that he played in.
Yeah, the game that mattered the most,
Noted.
right?
Noted.
So I think I like the Dixon one more.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I've got 2 more if you'll allow it here.
Sure.
Fidone, he went from 19.5 to 20.5 on receiving yards. I like the lower there. I think his reception number is pretty right on, so I don't love that. I'd rather go with yardage for him. You can see his game log. He saw 5 against UTEP, 5 targets for 3 receptions, 2 targets in both his Colorado and Northern Iowa game. Both of them, had 13 yards. Feels like a pretty decent spot. There is a chance, tougher competition, that there will be more checkdowns to him. So that does kind of perk my alarm bells a little bit. But I like the lower there. I also really like.
Oh boy, here it comes.
Surprise of the week here. David Alano, I like his higher than 1.5 field goals made. Gets that 1.3x boost. It is interesting. If you like the field goal number, why not just go with the kicking points for 5.5? Has a little bit of built-in luxury there, a little wiggle room, to where if he gets 1 field goal and 3 extra points, you still hit. But for the 1.3x boost, I'm okay with risking it on the field goal number.
So I'm shockingly going to avoid the field goal number.
Oof.
Fidone to me is really a decent number, so I'm just going to avoid it.
Yeah,
I can see why you like it. I would be concerned that like against real stiff competition that he just sees maybe an uptick in usage or something like
totally
that.
Fair. Yeah.
I don't necessarily hate it. I think it's fine. If you wanted to, put it in your slip, go for it. I'm not going to hate on you for it. I want to say Mox said that he liked it too. Instead, though, I think this Dante Dowdle number is just dead wrong.
What are we looking at here?
51.5 rushing yards.
Okay.
I think Underdog and these other books, because they all basically take each other's numbers.
Yep.
I think they're looking at this like it's like a big committee. And I'm to the point where it's, to me, Dowdle's the one.
1A at least.
And then they'll rotate some second and third guys and kind of eat those carries up between each other. 6 for 55 last week against Northern Iowa, but against Colorado, 17 for 74. Like, they wanted to win that game big time. They were good game script, and they hammered Dowdo. So I like that one. I have him in like the low 80s. So that's one that's really a good one for me.
You're not scared off at all by Big Ten defense being better than Colorado?
No, not necessarily, because I just think the volume is going to be there. And if
Fair.
he runs for 4.5 yards per carry, which is nothing crazy.
Yeah.
He just needs like
12 carries.
12 carries, something like that. So, what was a line that was up that was really interesting was Zachary Franklin. He had a 4 reception number, and I love that Zachary Franklin over. We hit that last week, and it was great.
He had 4.5 on Sleeper that I hit the under on. So
on the under there, that's feels like you're towing the line there.
I don't know. I just think that his usage is so sporadic. He's definitely getting the volume. He's getting the targets. I think I respect this Nebraska defense more than anything that Illinois has seen yet. And to me, I don't think that they're going to have to throw the ball that much. I think that the secondary is the better unit for this Nebraska defense. So I think that they're going to want to try and run the ball, control the clock, play Bielema ball.
See, I'm of the favor that I think the Illinois run game is awful.
Okay. That's
Fegan to me, extremely overhyped. I watched him against Central Michigan and thought, holy smokes, am I watching Caleb Jackson right now? This is brutal. So
somehow an insult to both him and Caleb Jackson.
We'll get to those are the two that I lumped together. They're like the same size. I'll get to Fegan here in a second. Franklin, I would be worried about an under because they threw him like 3 passes to start the game last week. It does seem like they want to get him involved. 10 targets 2 weeks ago, 8 last week. That's why I like the over. I am a huge reception guy. When I can get a reception number, I almost always take it over yards. 49.5 yards doesn't feel that awful either. Pat Bryant had the big game last week, but still Franklin, I think, went over that number. Still, even with his hot start, 5 receptions for 66. So I'm in on that. Fegan, all day. Give me the under on 15.5. Like, that's just the guy. He had 1 good game against Eastern Illinois, and then he's 26 for 65 in the 2 games post that.
Yeah.
Hard pass. I'm out.
Sure.
There's nothing, no part of me wants to play Fegan in DFS or bet overs. I'm going to bet under here. And then also, I thought Josh McCray looked better than Caden Fegan last week, and he outperformed him. So I wonder if
many are saying this. Yeah.
So I'm fired up about him.
Cool.
We have a Washington State game is on Friday, as well as the Stanford game. Which one would you want to look at first?
Can I ask one question real quick? If you're on the Dante Dowdle higher, are you on the Ramir Johnson under at 29.5?
Let me tell you. Let me look at my numbers real quick. Ramir Johnson, I think, is the 2-ish, and I actually technically my numbers like the over.
Okay. I just wanted to.
I would be more inclined to go under on Gabe Irvin or Emmett Johnson, but I don't think that anyone does that.
Let's take a look at this. You said Stanford Syracuse.
Well, whatever game you wanted, I was leaving it up to you.
I am very much interested in the Stanford Syracuse game. I'm trying to figure out who's going to disappoint on Syracuse this week. Like, it feels like we can't possibly have a good game for Allen, Pena, and Gadsden. And I'm leaning Gadsden as the guy that gets the
short end of the stick.
The short end of the stick. 75.5 receiving yards. I know he's crushed that early, like 108 against Ohio and then 98 against Georgia Tech. But they've seen it. It's on tape 2 weeks in a row. Stanford has to come out and say, hey, like, we're going to try and defend it. The counterpoint to this is you look at Stanford against TCU in week 1 and how they were gashed by Jack Beck, who is basically Gadsden light.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's an argument on both sides. I'm curious your take on the Gadsden number and which of these Syracuse guys you have the most confidence in.
I think I would continue to have the most confidence in Gadsden.
Okay.
I just think that he's the most talented. He's the best of the bunch. I think I would rather attack Umari Hatcher unders.
Yeah, 31.5.
Yeah, he had a good game against Georgia Tech, but his full picture of like how he's, of his year is, to me, is not as high as 31.5.
Yeah.
It's really hard to say what exactly we're going to get out of Syracuse. Part of me is like, is this going to keep happening? Like, are they going to continue to throw for this? Like,
yeah,
I
just
don't know.
crazy.
At some point, McCord's not going to hit 300 passing yards, right? So I don't know.
You have to assume that.
So I have a hard time figuring out Stanford's running back room, which I don't think they give us anything, which is good. That one to me is just total wash. I have no idea what to expect there.
I think I saw they had some touchdown numbers up early, but they don't have anything anymore.
But ultimately, I think the Stanford stuff is fairly accurate.
Yeah.
I don't think I want to target any of this. Is there someone that pops for you?
I don't know enough about the Syracuse defense at this point in time to say with any high confidence. I kind of like this Ismail Cisse lower at 18.5 on his longest reception. From what I've seen, and granted, this is just from watching the TCU game, a lot of his stuff was close to the line of scrimmage, low ADOT stuff, and using him in like fly sweeps and things. Now, granted, it just takes one of those to break, and you're, out on that. But I've been gravitating and doing a little bit more consideration to these longest reception and like longest rush options. And he's a guy that I am okay with taking the under on for like a long play, a big play.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, he's used in the run game. So that's that kind of style he is. As long as Syracuse can tackle, you pretty much can
that's
avoid
the big question there.
Yeah. If I had to choose one, I think I would go A.O. Maynor over 56.5 receiving yards. I have him in the high 60s, but I think we need to figure out how to say this guy's name. Cisse. There's no accent mark, but maybe.
Yeah.
He's been kind of impressive, getting some good usage on the ground and through the air. So I think technically I like the over on his receiving yards, but nothing that really moves me.
Alec seems like a decent option. I'm looking at his game log with TCU. He went off and he underperformed against Cal Poly, but they weren't throwing the ball a ton. So,
yeah. What about Washington State, San Jose State? We only have stuff for the Cougars so far.
This is the Super Bowl of Friday night matchups. I feel like should be high scoring.
It's a great way to end the night.
How are you feeling about which of these numbers do you like better? Do you like the passing yard, the rushing yard, or the passing rush bundle there with Mateer?
So I have him for 264 and 65. So that puts him at 311. Yeah, it's pretty much identical.
Yeah.
I don't know. Mateer is one of the hardest guys, I think, to project in this rushing offense.
Yeah.
Or just the offense in general is hard because they want to throw in theory, but Mateer loves to run.
He loves all
running plays for him. Yeah. So then it becomes this whole thing of like he ran essentially 50% of times for the team in back-to-back games. Like that's a lot of usage. When does that stop? It's a short week. Do we see maybe that volume do it?
You can't even say like it's just against the good teams that he runs either, because he ran for 55 against Portland State too. Like
he's been impressive. I don't think any of us expected him to do this so far.
Yeah, and no. Well, I guess they have a reception line for Hudson. Do they have one? Don't have one for Williams. 5.5 or 5 even for Chris Hudson. He hasn't hit that mark at all yet. Do you like going under on the 5 receptions?
His volume has been really high.
It has been. He's getting the targets. He's just not bringing it in.
It's kind of crazy. I wonder if it's just because he's outside and that's just maybe a little bit difficult of a throw for Mateer. I don't know. Technically speaking, we like the over. I think I would avoid it though.
Yeah.
But the nice thing is if you were to bet it at 5, he has to get to 6. So it just almost feels like you're playing it for a push here.
Yeah, that's fair.
Because you got to think those 50% of receptions that feels very atypical. But if you if I were to move his numbers to 55% caught, he goes to 4.9 from 5.7. So I don't know. His volume is there though. That's the scary thing. It's the volume. All it takes is maybe 1 or 2 easier catches than previous weeks, and then you're toast.
Yeah,
I feel like these lines are fairly competitive for sure.
Yeah, they're definitely calculated in the way that they're releasing them too, without dropping San Jose State stuff. I don't hate anything that they have up here, but there's nothing that I'm like super anxious to put in on. That said, I'm really excited to watch this game, so I'm gonna have some action.
You're gonna find a way.
Yeah.
I think the one I would go for is under Kyle Williams, 69.5.
69.5. I think that's smart. Just with the way that this game script unfolds, they probably won't need to hit him on big plays. So I do think that that's probably the best of the bunch so far.
Did you hear the Washington State's quote about San Jose State being the best team in the Bay Area last couple of years?
No, I didn't.
Who else is in the Bay Area? I don't know California well enough. Is that a dig at somebody else?
I don't think so. Like, I think that
it's who did they beat out? Like Oakland Community College? Like, I can't think of any other school. Like Cal's not there, Stanford's not there. USC's obviously LA, UCLA.
Well, technically Google considers Stanford and Cal both Bay Area schools, but I thought
that might be a dig at Cal, but I don't know. That's awesome. I like that. Good for that coach. We have a couple minutes before we wrap up. Is there a game or a prop that screams to you that's from the Saturday stuff?
I haven't looked a ton at Saturday. Let's go over to. Do they have a CJ Bailey?
They do
154.5. Yeah, why not? Let's go over on 154.5. I've professed my belief in him this week. It's going to take one big play from Concepcion and then a competent dink and dunk, maybe some garbage time against Clemson. But I think that that's a decent number to attack.
I think I would avoid it. I just hate these, especially quarterbacks. We're not
really a ton of variance. Like I'm not going to play a ton of it, but I like
right. Orgy, if you think about it too, like Orgy's number is at 119.5. Like that's dropped 12 yards or so. 43.5 yards for rushing for him.
Okay.
One thing I'll say before we make our picks, DJU last week, what they do is they open up fantasy point numbers at the end, like right before the game.
Close to game time.
12 hours. DJU's number was 18.5 fantasy points. That like never was even close.
Yeah.
And I would say if you want to get action on that, because there is consideration that he's going to get benched, that he might not, like they're going to script series for this other guy. And so I think that if you're going to go that route of DJU unders, I think I would do fantasy points. I wouldn't do the passing yards. I think he actually hit, if you bet his passing yards late in the week, you might have lost.
Yeah.
So I would look at fantasy points for him as it comes out.
I like it.
All right, so let's make our picks. Last week, I went 0 for 2. Jalen Milroe and Lawrence Arnold, and I can't even blame overtime. You went 1 for 2. You had kind of a bad beat with Jace Brown. He had it at 60. You had 53.5 under. Yeah. But you had Ricky White, the literal zero sweat.
Yeah, for real.
Yeah. So very nice. 4-3 is how it plays out. We got to get better. So I'm going to go Dominic Raiola. You know that. So I'm just taking that one.
You're going to take it off the board from me?
If you're not going to call it your favorite one in the Nebraska game, I'm not allowing you to grab that. So
totally valid.
Which one are you going for besides that?
That's totally valid. I'm going to go with the lower on Bonner. Receiving yards. I know I like the reception number better, but I'm going to go lower on that one.
14.5 receiving yards. Okay. I'm going to go. I mean, do we want to go all Nebraska again?
I mean, I have another one locked and loaded that you're not going to pick. So.
Why don't you go for it? Why don't you tell me what it is?
Yeah, if we're going to do all Nebraska game, we'll toss a bonus one out that won't count. Well, you want to do 3 this week?
Let's do 3 this week. Let's do 3 this week.
I went David Alano higher on his field goal, 1.5.
Gross.
We're doing it. It's so gross. It's not even a fun sweat.
I'm going to take Dante Dowdle over 15.5 yards.
Cool.
And then the last one I'll do, because if I'm going to get fiery and feisty about a player, Caden Fegan, Under 50.5 yards. I think he's also 50.5 yards. Oh, Dado's 51.5. Gotcha. I mean, you could put that number at 30.5. That guy's not going to break it.
So are you doing, is Fegan your third pick here?
That's my third pick. I'm actually going to bump it to 30.5 and double hot tamale that joint. That's going to be like a 5x payout.
Yeah. I am going to go in on, I'm trying to go off the board, something that maybe we didn't see or didn't talk about earlier.
You like Stacey Sneed?
I do like Stacey Sneed this week, but I am going to go higher on Tyler Shuck. His 255.5. I think that game is going to be a shootout. I contemplated the Chris Bell 35.5. He's just not getting the usage that we thought he would, but this seems like a really great game where he could get some increased looks.
You said, so you're going Shuck over 255?
Shuck over 255.
Okay. I don't hate that. I mean, we talked about the pace being a little slow for them, but I don't think that's going to be a concern. I think they could be super effective in that game. But
for sure.
Awesome. Well, hope you guys enjoy the show, whether you're watching it live or recorded. Like, subscribe, and do all that fun stuff. Leave us a message. Hit us up in chat. Otherwise, we'll catch you guys next week.